The following is a recording of a live questions and answers session with Chris McCann that took place on Friday, December 21st, 2018.
Good evening, everyone, and welcome to eBible Fellowship's Friday night question and answer program. During this time, we're going to open up the room to take your call, and each person is invited to share by dialing the number that was just mentioned. And we'll be glad to take your call, and I'll try to respond as much as possible by going to the Bible, which is God's holy word. And it is in the Bible that we find answers to our spiritual questions according to the perfect will of God. And since God is revealing much truth at this time of the end, it gives us great encouragement when we're searching the Bible that an answer will be found. Well, we have only a short time together, so we're going to get started right away by going to the first person on the phone tonight. Welcome to our Friday night question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Yes, I believe you said that you were once a drug counselor and an alcohol counselor. And I don't know, what I wanted to know is, because not everybody you were working with was probably a child of God, but what I want to know, what was the strategy that you used with these addicted people to help them get off of alcohol and drugs?
Well, I worked at, it was called DRC in Philadelphia, Diagnostic Rehabilitation Center, and it was a detox as well as a counseling center. And for a couple of years, I had a group that were dually diagnosed. They had either alcohol and drug problems plus mental health issues. And at that time, the reason why I went there was I had gone to AA, and I had thought, you know, it's interesting how God used AA in my life, because it sort of opened up the whole idea of God. Prior to that, I really knew hardly anything about God. You know, I think I went to church twice in my life. And then in AA, interestingly, it was in the military, in the Navy, they sent me to a rehabilitation center, and I had 6 weeks in a rehabilitation center in Rhode Island because I was sent there by my captain. And so really it was like the government was directing me, go get cleaned up, stop drinking. And it was there for the first time that there was encouragement to find a higher power. And that's the language of the 12 steps and the language they use in this government rehabilitation center. They present it, well, it can be whatever you want. It could be God, it could be the light bulb. And, you know, you kind of weed out those stupid ones because this is the way AA was presented. And then you realize, if you're serious, that you cannot stop drinking or doing drugs based on your own strength. You need a higher power to help you. And so it's pretty obvious, and most people in AA, I think, do turn to God, at least a God of their own understanding, and that's, of course, the major problem. But what it did, it opened up things for me to God. And then when I got out of the Navy the next year and went back home, and I ended up getting a job a block away from this rehabilitation center, and I didn't even know about it. It just worked out that way. And during that other job, as I was driving, I turned on family radio by accident, and I began listening to family radio, and especially Mr. Camping. And soon after, I noticed that this rehabilitation center was down the street, and I applied, and after a little while I got the job, and I started working there. So at that point, there was like 2 trains of thought going on in my mind, where I was learning 2 different things. I was continuing to learn the 12 steps, going to meetings, and through working at this DRC place. But I kept listening to Mr. Camping and Family Radio, and he was teaching me about God, the true God of the Bible. And he was teaching me, well, God was teaching me through him, and I was being taught about sin and how it works out in the life of a sinner. And it was very obvious that the reason I drank was because I was a sinner, and this was a sin weakness. So I'm learning that and very interested in that. And so I begin to desire to, teach people the truth back where I'm working. And I have this group of dually diagnosed clients. But I realize even though they say in these 12-step groups, in these rehabilitation places, they say that you have to get to the core issue. You have to get to the bottom of things to find out why did you drink or why did you do drugs. What is at work inside of you that you did these things to the degree you did? And so finally I think, well, here's the answer. It's because I'm a sinner, and this is my particular sin weakness. And the solution is the Lord Jesus Christ and the Bible. To be saved from sin, to find spiritual strength in God through salvation. And that understanding was not permitted to be shared. And, of course, that's made known. And you can kind of go around it, but you can't talk about it directly. And so then that's when I thought, well, what I really have to do is become a Christian counselor. Then I'll have freedom to tell people the truth. Because as long as I'm in secular counseling with drug and alcohol counseling, I'll never be able to tell people the complete truth. And so after a while, I guess the Lord, I know God works through all things. But after a while, it got in my mind, I'm going to go to seminary. And the reason I wanted to go to seminary was not to be a pastor. It was to be a Christian counselor and so forth. And then things kind of, we make our plans, but God is the one who determines our steps. And it wasn't long after seminary that I heard about September 1994, back in 1992, and that became the main focus of my life for the next 2 years. And then thereafter, it's just been the Bible, the Bible, the Bible. So what I would say to anyone struggling with alcohol or drugs is that if you are saved, and that's a big if at this point, because here we are several years into the final judgment of mankind, several years after God has shut the door of heaven, and everyone's spiritual condition has been fixed, which means that everyone who is one of God's elect is at least 7 years or thereabouts. They've been a child of God for 7 years because the Holy Spirit had to indwell them prior to May 21, 2011. So God's Spirit has been indwelling this person. And, after a while, you really have to wonder, well, why am I still struggling with this particular sin? Why is this sin having dominion over me? Why is it ruling me? Why does it dictate to me what I am to do? And I obediently submit and follow it and bow down to it and serve it as my God. Either Jesus Christ is God or this sin is Lord of my life. And it can't be both. And we're living in a time where God very jealously is making himself known as Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And of course, this has to do with the putting down of Satan, the putting down of all official rule over this world. But it's also very personal for each person, for each individual who says that Christ is their Lord. Okay? If Jesus is your Lord, then there needs to be submission. There needs to be finally submission on these issues of sin weakness in our life. There has to be movement. There has to be no more continuing to, I'll live as a Christian for a week and then sin and go right back to serving that sin for a week and back and forth, year after year. No. Christ is Lord of Lords and King of Kings. And all of these high places within our own being, within our own life, must be put down, and he has to rule. He has to be Lord. But thank you for calling and sharing. And let's go to the next caller. Welcome to our Friday night question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Chris McCann, how you doing? I have a question, a comment. I would just want to read 2 sentences from a book by Harold Camping, and then the script that he next to it. He says, okay, we must be aware that unsaved mankind, whether chosen by God to become saved or not chosen to become saved, is spiritually dead. Both in body and soul, they are thoroughly infected by sin. That is why we read in Matthew 15:19, and I'll take your comments over the air. For out of the heart proceed evil thoughts, murders, adulteries, fornications, thefts, false witness, and blasphemies.
Well, yeah, what are you interested in? I'm not sure.
I'm talking about when it's counseling, and you were talking that some of them were dual addicted and stuff. And is it true, though, that once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic? I mean, I don't really follow that kind of teaching. What do you think about that?
Yeah, well, is it true once a sinner, always a sinner? You know, I think that's how we can think about it. But it's correct to tell people who have a sin weakness, you better stay away from it. You better stay away from it completely, 100%. Don't play around with it. That's basically what that whole statement is saying, that once an alcoholic, always an alcoholic. Don't think, well, I haven't had a drink for 5 years or 10 years, time to go celebrate. And, you know, people have that tendency to do that kind of thing in a lot of different areas. Oh, I've been good on my diet for 30 days. I haven't had any sweets. Well, now let me go celebrate with a giant piece of cake and some ice cream, and you're back gaining all the pounds and maybe even more than you had before. And, you know, what does the Bible tell us concerning the flesh? Concerning the flesh. And that's what this all relates to, is when we become born again, when we're given a new spiritual heart and soul, and we're without sin in our soul, is it our soul that would want to drink or want to overeat or want a cigarette? No, it's not our soul. It's not our soul that wants these things any longer. As it says here, when we have a heart of stone, then out of the heart proceed all those evil desires. But when we become saved, the flow of evil is cut off. And desire is not coming forth from the heart if we're truly saved. It's coming from the flesh. The flesh wants, craves, lusts after things of the world. And so if we stop drinking for a period of time, well, why not have a little glass of wine? Where does that thought come from? Well, of course, it's from the fleshly part of us. Again, we've done good on our diet. Well, let's celebrate. Where does that come from? And it's always the flesh. And here's what God tells us in Colossians should be our attitude towards the flesh. In Colossians chapter 3, it says in verse 5, well, let me read the previous verse. In Colossians 3, beginning in verse 3, for you're dead, and your life is hid with Christ in God. When Christ, who is our life, shall appear, then shall ye also appear with him in glory. Mortify, therefore, your members which are upon the earth, fornication, uncleanness, inordinate affection, evil concupiscence, and covetousness, which is idolatry, for which things' sake the wrath of God cometh on the children of disobedience, in which ye also walked sometime when ye lived in them, but now ye also put off all these: anger, wrath, malice, blasphemy, filthy communication out of your mouth. Mortify your members which are upon the earth. What does the word mortify mean? It means put them to death. Kill your members. No, not literally. We're not to harm ourselves physically, but this isn't speaking of a physical problem. It's a spiritual battle between the part of us that God has saved and the part of us that God has not saved. He saved our soul. He's not saved our members or our physical body. And one must one must obtain preeminence. One has to rule and have dominion over the other. And so God is instructing us a very important truth here. When you have a sin, sort of like a battle of old, two soldiers in an ancient battle, and they've been dueling and sword fighting, and the one soldier falls finally beneath you, and you have your sword to his neck. Well, what are you going to do? Now, as God is telling us, instructing us, if we see the analogy, that this is the lust, the sinful desire beneath us, beneath our feet, with the sword at its throat, and God says, run it through. Kill it. Kill it. No mercy. Do not let it up. Do not give it another opportunity, because it can come back much stronger, and the next thing you know, you're going to be the one laying on the ground, and it will have its sword at your throat. And so the helpful thing that God is teaching us with Colossians 4:5 is, do not feel sorry for yourself when you are turning from a particular sin. Oh, poor me. It's Christmas time, and I'm trying not to overeat. I'm trying to stay away from the cake and the ice cream and the candy, and it's the holidays, Christmas and then New Year's, and it's the time of parties. And what do you find at parties? Cake and ice cream and candy and soda and all kinds of sweet things. Poor me. Poor me. And there's a saying in AA, when you have that kind of mindset, poor me, you might as well finish it, pour me another drink, because that is what will happen when you feel sorry for yourself. You're really trying to convince yourself you're worthy, you deserve to have the thing that you want, that you're lusting after, and so poor me. Self-pity is a horrible thing. It's a horrible thing, and we should never feel sorry for ourselves, especially if we're doing the right thing finally in an area we should have done the right thing in a long time ago. And now, by God's grace, maybe we've been doing the right thing for a little time, a little period of time, and now we think we deserve a break. We deserve, and it's just sinful thinking. Sinful thinking. Don't let up on it. By God's grace, through the power of His Spirit, continue to put it to death and mortify the members. But thank you for calling and sharing. And let's go to our next caller. Welcome to our Friday night question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Yes. Hi, Chris. First of all, I'd like to say I thank you and eBible Fellowship. You guys, all of eBible, are just wonderful to have someone to go to and ask these questions. My question is kind of, is on the line of what you've been talking about. I looked at Harold Camping, and he was a very humble, he lived a very modest You know, he had an old car that he drove. I imagine that car was probably 15, 20 years old. He did not live a lavish lifestyle. My question is, what kind of lifestyle should a Christian be living? Should he give up going to sports? Should he give up nice cars? You understand my question?
What was the first thing you said? Should he give up what?
You know, going to ball games.
Sports?
You know, like if he's into hunting. You know, these things that the world is doing. But should a Christian be doing those things also, especially since we're living in the last days? So that's my question.
Well, you know, the Bible gives us direction for practically everything. Practically everything. It begins to give us wisdom and understanding in how we should live. And so, for example, sports, what does the Bible tell us? Well, first of all, it tells us Sunday is the Sabbath. Sunday's the Sabbath. That really will help us if we have a problem or in the area of sports. That is, if sports are too strong, if we're delving into them too much, Sunday will probably reveal that, because practically all the sports teams play on Sunday. Some of the major ones, that's the big day. That's the big day that are set aside. And so what are you going to do? And what every child of God is called upon to do is leave it on Saturday, leave it for 6 days of the week. If you want to play if you have a court out back and you want to play some basketball, then leave it for those 6 days. Or if you do take your child to a game, not on Sunday, never on Sunday. And also, we don't watch it. We don't follow the sports channels on Sunday. Not even a little bit. Not even a toe onto that 24-hour period. That is God's holy day. And God starts there. What great wisdom God has, that He gives us the Sunday Sabbath, and it's such a tremendous help for the child of God in living the Christian life. God gives us that day, and as we desire to do the will of God, one thing it does, it starts to show us that we don't need the sports, the television, the movies, the things we've been doing every day of the week, that many of them are part of the world. It begins to reveal to us, because every Sunday, stop, put it aside, focus on God through the Bible, and we start to learn. Hey, you know what? That I can exercise control over these things that maybe I never exercised any control over in my past life, because I thought it was a good thing. I thought there was never anything wrong with it. So it starts to show us that through what God has done in us, we are able to put aside certain things, to stop certain things, trains of thought, patterns of behavior, whether sinful or not, or just worldly. We're able to, again, for 24 hours, this is God's holy day. And we do our best to remove our foot from His Sabbath, which helps us come Monday. And after a while of doing this, we begin to realize, as we delight ourselves in God's holy day, you know what? That's the best day of the week. That's the best day of the week. It's the best day for me. I usually have no hangover that come Monday. That is what every other day, Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday, I do stupid, foolish things. I waste time. But from Sunday to Monday, you know, I over a period of time, we're redeeming that day. We're redeeming the time, and we should start to realize it really is good for me, and a blessing for me. And so now you see, we'll start to want to follow what we're learning on that day the other days of the week. And so God will work these things out. You know, we don't have to say, well, you know, don't do this and don't do that, and no longer this. God is in control of each individual elect, and He will let it be known. He will let it be known as maybe we're engaged in some activities that are not God glorifying, that are not good, and we're going to start getting that hangover effect and thinking, well, you know, I'm just wasting time. And after a while the conviction grows to the point where God may start chastening us, correcting us, and then we realize, I have to stop this. So God will again handle that in the life of each one of us, and it's something that He'll make very clear to us. But thank you for calling and sharing, and let's go to our next caller. Welcome to our Friday night question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Mr. McCann, with that very gracious and sound answer you gave to that nice man, you ended it by saying, by God's grace through His Spirit. And I have 3 verses that might be helpful to him, and it would be Mark 9:2
okay.
and Romans 12:2 and
okay.
2 Corinthians 3:18, and in all 3 of those passages, transfigured, transformed, and changed are all the very same word.
All right, let's take a look. Starting in Mark 9, verse 2, and after 6 days Jesus taketh with him Peter and James and John, and leadeth them up into a high mountain apart by themselves, and he was transfigured before them. And then Romans 12, verse 2 says, and be not conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind, that ye may prove what is that good and acceptable and perfect will of God. And then 2 Corinthians 3, verse 18, and it says there, but we all, with open face beholding, as in a glass, the glory of the Lord, are changed into the same image from glory to glory, even as by the Spirit of the Lord. So the word changed is the same as transformed.
And transfigured. Yes, and in renewing of your mind, if you look that up, it has one other match, which is the Holy Spirit does the renewing. So that man is saved, has all the power of God to say no to any of those bad things.
Well, thank you very much for sharing these verses, and they are helpful. They are helpful, one excellent way that God is able to transform our minds, to change our minds, is of course He does that through salvation. But one way, practical way it works out in our life is when our minds are going over the Scripture. And it would be a good idea to jot down these verses and memorize them. So when we have a thought of something, say, no, I'm not going to think about that. Let me try to remember that verse, and then our minds are directed to go in a different way. But thank you again, and let's go to the next caller. Welcome to our Friday night question and answer program. Please go ahead with your call.
Hi, Chris. Yeah, if I remember correctly, the word transformed is where we get our word metamorphosis. Like a caterpillar changes into a butterfly. It's a totally different creature. But I just wanted to remind everybody that we have a Day in the Word, which starts on Sunday at 10 o'clock this Sunday.
Oh, okay. Yeah, thank you. Thank you for the reminder. Lord willing, this Sunday it will be a Day in the Word at the Merchantville Community Center in Merchantville, New Jersey, which is about 15 minutes from Philadelphia. And all are welcome to attend. Really, it starts at 10:30. We do try to get there at 10 to set up, but we hope to start at 10:30. And also let me say that the previous month's Day in the Word from November will air this coming Sunday. And while we're having December's Day in the Word, and then what happens this Sunday would air the following month. So we're trying to do that for a while. So anyone who listens to eBible this week will hear the studies that were presented last month. But thank you for calling and sharing, and I would like to thank everyone for sharing your questions and comments and concerns. And we have trouble. We all have trouble. We all have problems. I don't know of anyone in the world who doesn't. But we're blessed to have a God who knows all of our troubles, and not only who's aware of them, but can help. He can help. God is our refuge and strength, a very present help in time of trouble. And so if we are struggling with something, with a sin, with something that's beating us down, and we're getting more and more tired of it, we realize this shouldn't be, then we can turn to God and we can ask for help. Help, O Lord, help. And our help does come from Him. And actually there's a verse, I think, in Chronicles that says, the eyes of the Lord run to and fro throughout the whole earth to show Himself strong on behalf of them whose heart is perfect towards Him. And of course, that would be the elect who receive that perfect born-again heart. God, as it were, scans the whole earth. He's looking out upon the whole earth. Where can I find someone with a perfect heart who needs my help? And that the only one qualified would be His elect children. And we all need His help. So it's not as though God is disinterested and He's got His back to us and we have to tap Him on the shoulder to get His attention. He's actively scanning the earth, looking for opportunities to help His people. And so we can go to a God who is very much interested in aiding us, in helping us through whatever we're going through. But thank you again for joining us tonight, and please be with us. Well, actually, this Sunday will be pre-recorded, so we won't have a live Q&A. But Lord willing, next week when we get together next Friday, we'll have our next live Q&A question and answer program. But for now, good night, and may the Lord's perfect will be done.
And thank you for joining us again for eBible Fellowship's Questions and Answers time with your speaker, Chris McCann. You can join us for these questions and answers sessions Sunday afternoons following the Sunday studies and certain weeknights following the Monday through Friday studies. Check eBibleFellowship.com for the current schedule. Until next time, may the Lord's perfect will be done.